Mr. Tapping.
Good morning, Chairman
Good
Richard.
afternoon, excuse me.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, board members. I'm John Tapping, the Director of Risk Management and Project Controls for the High Speed Rail Authority. I want to start it off with really kind of an overview of our robust risk management program, and it's really a four-legged stool. What you've seen today, you've seen in the box here, financial performance, audits and reviews, and contract performance. Russ gave you an overview of financial performance, basically ongoing metrics as we move forward. Audits and reviews, essentially we're looking at lessons learned and best practices, and you saw some comments from Paula in that regard. Contract performance, Scott had some ongoing metrics you saw today on the performance of the contracts as we're moving forward. But risk management really is a forward-looking early warning mechanism that we use. We use some really sophisticated analyses where we Monte Carlo simulations which we run, which give a probability of outcomes. And so we've tailored our approach really with this four-legged stool. The robust program brings it all together as our risk management program. Part of that program, we have some legislative requirements, which is also incorporated in our risk management plan. And it's basically a very disciplined process and methodical process of analyzing risks on the project. You identify the risks, you identify a probability and impact of the risk, and you update estimates using a risk approach. In other words, it's a forward-looking approach. And for those at the Finance and Audit Committee meeting this morning, we talked about some of those results.
Mr. Chairman, if I may interrupt John for a moment.
Yep.
For my colleagues and for the public, earlier this morning, the Finance and Audit Committee received a report from staff that we had asked for earlier, and I think that the information provided in that staff is really important for the board to hear, with your permission.
Of course, yeah.
So what I'd like to do, John, if we could ask Gary Griggs, who's the Director of Delivery for this project, to join you. And if you would like to go over the information that was provided to Finance and Audit, specifically with regards to construction project number 1 in the Valley. So John and Gary, take it over.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman Richard, Vice Chair Richards, and board and directors, and CEO Jeff Morales. My name is Gary Griggs. I'm Director of Program Delivery for the California High Speed Rail Project. As Scott reported, we're making significant progress in the delivery of CP1, and we spoke specifically to CP1 this morning in Finance and Audit. As you've seen in our reporting to Finance and Audit, we have challenges as we move forward with delivering a program of this complexity. And that's not unusual when you undertake a project of this magnitude. The first 2 years of the program of CP1 activity is really concentrated a lot on the contractor mobilization and also completing final design. And given that it is a design-build contract, that is fairly common, as you need that initial period to complete design. But as we've been reporting, we have had challenges in a number of areas. One is right-of-way, which Scott reported on. The other is in third-party agreements, and also in environmental, and especially in reevaluations. So we'd like to speak to those and the assessments that we've made based on risk management as we go forward. A lot of the issues we deal with are external factors, obviously, so we're working closely with our stakeholders to address those. But we wanted to focus in particular on what we're doing internally to address those challenges that we're facing in those 3 areas. We on right-of-way got off to a bit of a slow start because of litigation, and that held us up. Once we got that cleared, we had quite a backlog of right-of-way that we need to deliver. As Scott reported, we have over 700 parcels on CP1 alone. So we got a bit of a slow start. What we did is staffed up as quickly as possible, reorganized our delivery program in a way that would allow us to proceed. We've concentrated a lot in that on looking at the critical construction areas, that the contractor could start as quickly as possible on, and we've had good success in getting those particular areas cleared and ready for the contractor. In terms of third party, the agreements with the various utilities and railroad and other third parties have taken longer than we would have hoped, but that's not unusual, again, on a program like this. So again, there we have brought additional resources in to deal with third-party issues and move forward with those. And also associated with the schedule issues surrounding third party, we've also been seeing fairly significant increases in the costs associated with those utility issues. So we're also moving forward to address those. And then on the environmental side, we are having to do what are known as reevaluations. And these, in a lot of cases, associated with the contractors coming forward with what are known as alternative technical concepts that Scott mentioned. And those alternative technical concepts that have come forward from the contractor have affected significant savings in the construction costs on the project. But along with that comes the need to do some additional environmental work in terms of reevaluations and permitting work, and in some cases even right-of-way work that goes along with that. So that's affected us as well in terms of schedule and cost. I'll turn it back over to John to talk about risk management.
Okay, from a risk analysis perspective then, we look at some of these challenges that we're facing in the program, the slow pace of the right-of-way and the third-party agreements and the resulting construction that Gary mentioned. And we do our assessment of that, and there could be a potential for cost and schedule impacts as a result of these challenges. That said, there is an approved contingency for the contract, and that's what the intended use of the contingency is for, these unforeseen circumstances and risks associated with the project. And when we initially set up the contingency, we did it using a risk-based approach. We actually did identify a lot of these risks in that approach. Under the Finance and Audit Committee's oversight, then, we implement a state-of-the-art risk management program, which I described. And we do that really as an early warning mechanism, again, which I described, so that it gives us the opportunity to focus our efforts on the biggest bang for our bucks with regard to the most urgent risks that we should address in terms of cost and schedule. So it gives us an opportunity to address and mitigate these risks before we actually spend potentially additional costs. So these analyses are used then to drive prudent risk-based decision in a timely manner. The updated CP1 risk analysis performed indicates a negative trend with respect to 3 risks that we initially identified again. Those being right-of-way, utility relocations, and adjacent railroad requirements. The risk analysis indicates that we have the potential of exceeding the contingency envelope for CP1 if risk mitigation actions are not undertaken. Mitigations would involve such strategies as considering alternative design concepts that Gary talked about, as well as value engineering solutions. And we're looking at this for both CP1 and program-wide as well in order to mitigate this cost. And Gary will talk in more detail about the mitigation strategies that we intend to undertake. So at this time, based on an assessment of our risk management group, we are forecasting a need to increase contingencies on CP1 by about $150 million, which is about 10% of the original CP1 budget. Similarly, for the first construction segment, we forecast a need potentially for an additional $260 million. Again, and that is about 5% of the original contract budget. I want to stress that increasing the contingencies does not mean the existing budgets will actually be exceeded. It's still early. This is an early warning, and we're undertaking risk mitigation strategies and moving forward. It is really a management response to early detection of potential impacts based on our risk assessments that we continually undertake over the course of the project, and we will continue to do so. So at this point, I'd like to take it back over to Gary to discuss in detail some of the strategies.
Okay, thank you, John. So as I mentioned earlier, we're obviously working very closely with our external stakeholders and the resource agency and others to help us move forward with the program. I wanted to focus on the internal measures that we're taking that we've been discussing at Finance and Audit. In particular, we've been looking at strengthening the organization, staffing up to meet the demands, and setting up reporting and accountability of systems that will allow us to achieve our targets. For right-of-way, for example, under the leadership of Alan Glenn, we're now up to approximately 35 staff supporting him. Along with, we have 4 right-of-way engineering contracts and 12 appraisal and acquisition contracts working as part of his team. So we brought that team up to a level now that we are seeing the productions that we need to achieve as we move forward, as Scott reported in his report. And he had shown that we're about 60% of the delivery of those parcels within CP1, and concentrating on those critical areas of construction. We're doing a similar thing in terms of organization and staffing of our third-party group under Paul Engstrom, and we're bringing additional resources there. One of the challenges we've had on third parties is the usual challenge of trying to estimate the cost and understand the extent and scope of utilities when they're not visible underground, and that's been a challenge. So we're trying to bring in additional resources to help us supplement what we get from the regional consultants in our understanding of specifics of the number of utilities and the scope of the utility relocations that are required. And then on the environmental side, under the leadership of Mark McLaughlin, we've organized that group. He has about 40 professionals working in his group. A lot of that obviously is concentrating on those 10 environmental reviews that we need to get completed, but also on those reevaluations that I spoke to that are required and the permitting that's required as we move forward with the construction. So those are some of the organizational measures that we're taking. One of the other things that we were asked to talk about at Finance and Audit was to discuss change orders. And those are always something that we have to deal with. Change seems to be something that's common in the work that we do. So we need to obviously manage those very closely as they come forward. To date, and Scott reported on this as well, on CP1 we have approximately 14 million of approved change orders that of those that we've received from the contractor. So, and that's drawing down from our contingency. We have a very heavily managed process as we want to do on any of these projects in the way that we handle change orders. So there are a number of steps that we go through. Contractor initiated change orders, obviously we're going to see those and we're receiving those. And the way we handle those is we first of all review them to see if there's merit in the change order. If there's not merit, then we will reject it, and the contractor then, if the contractor wants to pursue that change order further, will have to come forward with a claim, and we'll have to go through a resolution process. Often we will actually initiate our own change orders as the authority if there are things that we want to change in terms of the scope as well. And then there are very strict provisions in our contracts as to how we should handle these change orders in regard to negotiation and processing as we go through the steps of a proposed change order, pending, and then finally executed. And we report on that regularly to the Finance and Audit Committee. Risk management is a big part of that too, and that's what what John just reported on in terms of the fact that we do risk assessments to look forward to see what we may see as potential change orders that are out there and try to put a cost and schedule impact to them. So I think we have a very good process in place for handling of those change orders. I would point out that not all change orders will affect cost and schedule. Sometimes it's just a matter of of documenting the changes that we make in scope as we go forward. And some change orders will in fact result in a credit back to us as a result of taking something out of the contractor's bid, for example, that we don't need to have done. The question was asked, given the expected costs and schedule delays or possible delays on CP1 that John spoke about, will this have an impact overall on the first construction segment? And as John reported, we are allowing, in terms of recommended increased contingency for a potential cost increase on CP1, and we are anticipating that there could be a schedule delay. However, that schedule delay we do not feel will result in a delay to the completion of the first construction segment, because we have float in our schedule, meaning that if CP1 is delayed, we still have time to complete the work that we need to do within the schedule deadline of the first construction segment. In terms of the cost impact, and John already reported on that, if there were an increase in the cost of CP1, we've also indicated a potential increase in contingency for the overall first construction segment, but we're going to manage and mitigate those impacts as we go forward to do everything possible to stay within the budgets that we currently have defined for the first construction segment. So I guess in closing of my comments, we obviously have had serious challenges, as you'd expect on a program like this, and a lot of lessons learned that we will apply as we go forward into the remainder of the program. But I think we've been able to identify the problems, act on them, address them, and contain them. And having the risk management approach that we have in forecasting potential actions that gives that early action notice that allows us to take action in a timely way to avoid the impacts downstream. So that completes my comments.
Thank you, Gary. And John. John, did you have anything else?
No, I just think I'm really proud of the risk management and the program delivery, how we're integrated as an organization and we work together. I think it's state of the art. Risk management, oftentimes you see in an organization, is something that's out to the side, and you can see that in this interchange that we're interlocked and work off each other's work. So it's a pleasure.
So I would guess I'd want to say a couple things. The first, Mr. Chairman, since you formed the Finance and Audit Committee with Jeff and with management, it has always been a primary goal to put together policies and reporting that would be able to report out to us early warning of anything that may be changing from what we had previously projected. And I think that one takeaway from here, and frankly a very important one, is that's exactly how it's working. So this is an early warning, as Gary has indicated. It doesn't mean the money is going to be spent, but the risk assessment certainly believes that and concludes that it's prudent to make provision for the contingency. The success of the mitigation measures that have already been put in place and the management of those will really ultimately determine whether or not we actually need any of the additional contingency. The fact is, it's a large, complex infrastructure project, and like all of them that have been completed around this country and the world, we deal with changing projections, and it is in fact the risk profile that we're charged with containing. And that's what we have been doing. I think that's what we're doing now, clearly. And I think this information is important for the public and certainly for the board. Beyond that, I think that what we do is we continue to manage, as I mentioned a moment ago, very carefully, and we will see in time how effective we've been with these mitigation measures. But we're certainly optimistic at this point, and I can tell you there is a reason to be very proud of Jeff and the management and staff, because they have jumped on this very quickly, and we should be the recipients of that quick action. Thank you, guys.
Well, thank you, Tom. I want to thank Director Richards and also Director Rossi, the Finance and Audit Committee, for the systems they've put in place to look at this, and also to thank Gary and John for what I think was a comprehensive presentation. So thank you all for your work on this, and I agree with Director Richards that it's something that the board just needs to continue to monitor, and we'll look to Finance and Audit to continue to bring these issues forward for the board and for the public. Any questions on this at this point? Okay, well, again, thank you very much for that. I think that was an important presentation. And with that, we have completed our regular agenda, and the board will enter into closed session in the adjacent conference room for, I think, a very short closed session, and we'll come back and report any actions after that. Thank you. Okay, we're back in open session. The High-Speed Rail Authority Board met in closed session. That closed session is concluded. We have no items to report. With that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.